Hello, everybody. I get these stories from time to time. Wall Street analysts becomes a novelist. Wall Street analyst gives up their job and turns to writing. Often that writing is about Wall Street and the morality and particularly the immorality of Wall Street. And that's the story today. There's a new novel out by Amran Gowani called Leverage. And surprise, surprise, Amran is a former Wall Street analyst who has turned his experience, I think, in Wall Street or at Wall Street for his fictional purposes. Amran is joining us from Chicago. Amran, have I fairly summarized your life in a sentence?
I believe you have.
Say some more, otherwise.
Yeah, no.
This will be the shortest interview in the history of Keen On.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely. And if I was going to qualify, I would add that Wall Street was my third life, and writing novels is my fifth life. I started off in my more nobler days as a scientist. I was going to be an organic chemistry PhD student and go on to academia and teach graduate students and write research proposals. And I quickly burned out of that world. I decided I went to the pharmaceutical industry. That was my first taste of the corporate world and some of the most corporate mercenary behavior that's out there. And I said, hey, I want to understand, how is it that you get to make multi-billion-dollar transactions? How is it that you get to figure out how to price these drugs for maximum profit and so-called shareholder value? And so I went on to get my MBA. And that's how I ended up finding my way to the investment banking industry as a sell-side analyst. And to be clear, I was the junior analyst, so I was the lackey. And but I did that for 3 years. I learned quite a bit. I pivoted quickly for a short period to business intelligence. Basically doing the same job you do on Wall Street, but for journalist pay. And I said, well, that's not going to work for me. And once we had our second child and my wife was climbing the corporate ladder nicely, I had my midlife crisis, and I said, hey, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book because I've seen a lot of interesting and depraved things, frankly, and I have stories to tell about it.
Yeah, before we went live, Amran, I asked you if you had a full-time job. You said you're a full-time novelist, which is a bullish statement, especially from a financial analyst, as you just revealed. Your wife also has a career, but is there really money in writing novels? This is your first one. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah, definitely not. There's definitely not money in writing novels. You don't do it for the money. I'm being flippant here, but the publishing industry is a very lopsided business, right? Like there's a very select handful of names, people that that are making a ton of money because they're established names. They're very prolific. They're extremely talented people. I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but they're generating the lion's share of the income. And then everyone else is out there kind of, scrounging around for scraps and just trying to make a name for themselves. And so, yeah, I mean, the money I made in the mid 2010s on my Wall Street bank dwarfs the money I made on the advance I got for my novel. And I actually got a pretty good advance. And I think that's just indicative of the types of profits that are available in the investment banking and industry and the pharmaceutical industry versus something like publishing. So you don't write novels because you want money, or at least you shouldn't. If you're looking for money, you should write novels because you're compelled to write, because you get compelled to tell stories.
What's a good advance? You said you got a good advance.
This is always tetchy, but I would say mine would be described as a good deal on the Publishers Marketplace grid. And so you can go look that up if you're so inclined. And it's real money. I was very satisfied and very pleased. It was my second go at writing a novel. So my first novel that I wrote, to kind of cut my teeth, figure out what I was doing. My advance for that one was 0. And so I figured out how to write, and become a more competent fiction and craft writer. And then I think I had a nice result with my second book. But it's not life-changing money. I'm not retiring to the Seychelles anytime soon. But but it's real money, and I was very satisfied and pleased that I had a chance to create some income for my family, right? Doing something creative.
You suggested that there's a cathartic element to writing. Is it, as I perhaps suggested before, a kind of revenge on Wall Street? Is it the creative catharsis? What is it about writing that attracts you so much? Because writing a novel is you seem a fairly cool fellow. You're not necessarily going to acknowledge this, but writing a novel is a very hard business. It's solitary. It's very, very challenging. I mean, the fact that you even sold it to a major publisher like Simon and Schuster is an incredible achievement.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that because writing a book is the hardest job I've ever done, other than being a parent. I've worked as a pharmaceutical organic chemist. I've worked as a pharmaceutical marketing guy, a Wall Street investment analyst. I mean, I certainly worked more hours because I didn't have a choice when I worked at an investment bank. But writing a novel is its own beast. Like you said, it's a solitary enterprise, and I think you do it because there's something in you that just it's got to come out. And so I joke a lot that I'm motivated by spite, but I didn't write my book because I was like trying to get back at Wall Street, because I mean Wall Street's going to move on with or without whatever I have to say about it in my novel. I wrote my book, and I write in general because I think it helps me process the world around me. It helps me understand the world around me. It helps me. I'm a satirist by nature, so everything that I write is very sharp, very sharp elbows, very rough and tumble. And so, that's my way of processing the world and communicating ideas that I think are important, using the satirical framework. And so Wall Street and corporate America in general are ripe for satire. I mean, there's a lot of really gross behavior, and there's a lot of really, horrible things that you see. And some of it you could almost understand. Some of it is just beyond comprehension, but that's just the nature of the world we've created. And so for me, writing, the catharsis in writing is about saying, hey, this is the world we're in, and this is how I'm trying to understand it.
Who are your models for writing about Wall Street? Tom Wolfe comes to mind, of course.
Yeah.
In a fictional sense, nonfiction, Michael Lewis. Who have inspired you? Who are you trying to emulate?
Trying to emulate, I mean, I think this will be a ridiculous statement, but the first book that I ever really read that changed my life when I was in my mid-20s and convinced me that I might try to do this one day was Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. And so, obviously that's not about Wall Street, it's about World War II. But the idea, like when I first read Catch-22, and I didn't come to writing until early in my early adulthood, and I didn't really I apologize. I didn't come to reading until my early adulthood, and I didn't come to writing until my middle age. And so, but when I first read Catch-22, I was like, I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know you were allowed to do this in a book. And that was really, revelatory for me. And so I thought, well, I have all these experiences in these disparate areas of academia, corporate America, Wall Street, and I want to give those places that I've navigated the Joseph Heller treatment. And so, of course, I've read a lot of Michael Lewis books. He's amazing. I've read Black Edge by Sheila Cole-Hackar is one of my favorite Wall Street books. Bad Blood by John Carreyrou is a legend of, this legendary tale of the Silicon Valley dysfunction, which, by the way, when I was out in San Francisco, that was an open secret that company was nonsense. I think.
What, Enron?
No, what do they call it? Theranos.
Right, Theranos.
Yeah. So I just felt like, I've seen a lot of things in my life.
The Elizabeth Holmes company, that, of course, Elizabeth Holmes went to jail. It's interesting, Amran, that you choose to write about Wall Street. You brought up Silicon Valley. They're increasingly inseparable. They're kind of geographically maybe different. In one centered in San Francisco, the other in New York. But there's a moving staircase between the two. And when most people think of corporate ills and woes and immorality in America, they think of Silicon Valley. Is Wall Street still a pretty bad place in your experience?
It is, and I think Silicon Valley has trumped Wall Street, just to show you just how ridiculous.
To use a word, of course.
Yeah, of course, a pun, I guess, intended. But what's really interesting about my experience is when I went to investment banking, I actually worked in San Francisco. And so that was an unusual experience for me. So the hedge fund that I created, the fictional hedge fund is also set in San Francisco. And I think there was
This is in leverage.
In leverage, yes. And it's called Prism Capital, and I made it all up. But I mean, I think what interested me about it was the interface between the investment banking and high finance industry, which we associate with New York and hedge funds in Connecticut. But there are a number of big players out in the West Coast, and I think they have their own kind of weird worldview because they're so close to Silicon Valley, and a lot of them do tech finance, and they do IPOs for these huge mega tech companies. And so you get the kind of techno-libertarian worldview of Silicon Valley added on top of kind of like the greed is good mentality of Wall Street. So you get a really toxic stew brewing out there. And I think that influenced me in the way I thought about writing my book.
What's the problem with places like Wall Street and Silicon Valley? I mean, there's only two places like that, Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Is it the people or the structure? Are the wolves of Wall Street or the bros of Silicon Valley, are they almost inevitably structural consequences of the system? Or are these bad people knocking around and they always show up in the worst places? Probably in the 1930s, they ended up in the mafia. And then in the 90s, they went to Wall Street, and now they're in Silicon Valley.
Sure. And I mean, I don't want to give people a pass writ large, but I tend to think of like structural problems as incentivizing really ugly behavior. And so, if you go back to, the raging 80s, the deregulation era under Reagan, and just, the greed is good mentality and kind of the advent of neoliberalism. When you run companies and you tell people that the only thing that matters in your company is shareholder value, then people are going to do everything they can to maximize shareholder value. And when you incentivize people to make the stock price rise at all costs, then they're going to do things to make the stock price rise at all costs. And if those things involve laying people off, if they involve skirting regulations, if they involve ripping people off, or just blatantly committing crimes, like when you create perverse incentives, I mean, you're going to get perverse outcomes. Now, I think that that's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is there's the certain type of people that are motivated by money, are motivated by power, and that there's an adverse selection phenomenon where they say, hey, this is the place for me to go and maximize my earning potential or maximize my ability to gain influence in kind of our economic and political framework. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both working together. And I don't have all the answers. If I did, man, I would be trying to tell people to change regulations. But I think that they work hand in hand. And so when you create frameworks like that have perverse incentives, then you're going to get perverse outcomes and people doing perverse behaviors.
Amran, some people will be watching this and thinking, oh, here's a guy who didn't succeed on Wall Street, didn't make a lot of money. Now it's full of rage, woke style rage. He's against capitalism. He's against America. He's against innovation. The smartest people always go to places like Silicon Valley and Wall Street where they can make money. That's just the nature of things. How would you respond to that?
I think that's a totally understandable critique. I mean, all I could say is that, without sounding like a total jerk, is that at every stage of my
I
life,
don't mind if you sound like a total jerk. You can sound like the Wolf of Wall Street or Mark Zuckerberg or Travis Kalanick.
Yeah. I mean, at every stage of my career, I mean, humbly speaking, I've been a pretty successful guy. Like I was the top performing analyst in my band. And when I was at Jefferies, the investment bank that I worked in San Francisco, and I got a nice bonus. And I just thought like, yeah, I could do this job, but this job doesn't align with my values. And so I don't want to say that, I'm always cautious to say that I'm not actually anti-capitalist and like, I'm not a Marxist or whatever nonsense, that people want to throw out there because, Marxism has been tried. It doesn't really work. I would say that I think that our regulatory environment for capitalism is really broken. And our kind of like philosophy that markets know all and privatization is better than public, the public government is just intrinsically wrong. I mean, there's a tension there. You don't want to have the government run everything. You don't want to have private corporations run anything. There's a balance there, right? And so I'm not anti-capitalist, but I don't think that the system that the nature of the regulatory environment that we're operating in is doing well by most people. I think when we're letting 75 to 100 people accumulate tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of dollars, and then we claim we don't have funding for schools, that's a grotesque way to create a society. Like I don't think that makes sense. I don't think that's equitable. And people will point out and say, oh, it's a race thing, it's a woke thing. I mean, poor white people are being exploited all across America that are not able to earn a living wage, or aren't able to afford housing, are struggling with inflation because of high food prices, high energy prices. Meanwhile, corporate profits are going through the roof. Wall Street's encouraging huge corporations to do share buybacks and pay big dividends to the shareholder class. Like you can run your society like that, and then it breaks down, and then we get what we've seen in the last, say, 10 to 12 years, or maybe even 17 years since the financial crisis really started, where it's like we've just got neoliberalism run amok, and most people are getting left behind, and a few people are enriching themselves. And if that's the society we want to create, I mean, I guess that's what we've done. But I don't think that's a very productive way to run our economy, and I certainly don't think it's sustainable. I mean, if you look at the, I don't know if when people read Leverage, this isn't a spoiler because it's chapter 1, but Leverage
Yeah, we don't
opens.
want any spoilers. We want everyone. I got to make sure, Amran, that you don't end up on the streets. I'm worried about you.
Yeah. So in Leverage, though, the book opens with a basically physical violence towards a corporation leads to a big, a fire and the deaths of a bunch of corporate executives, and that causes a financial crisis. Now, I started writing that in 2021, and then just last year we have the United Healthcare debacle with Luigi Mangione. I'm not going to even dare sit here and try to rationalize the guy's behavior. All I'm going to say is that when you push hard enough on people and you make a society where they feel like the rich are getting ahead and they're falling behind, then they're going to resort to violence. Like, let them eat cake in the French Revolution, right? I mean, like this isn't a new idea. And so
If they're lucky, get cake these days is expensive. Amran, what are your friends or your ex-friends or your colleagues on Wall Street at the hedge fund that you worked at? What do they think of what you're up to? Did you tell them? Have you told them?
I mean, I have a newsletter, and a lot of my old coworkers are on my newsletter. And I think probably the best compliment I've got so far in my book is that one of my old banking buddies read it, and he goes, "The book's awesome, and I feel like superfluous swine for working in this industry." And I thought, okay, mission accomplished. I'm still friends with the guy. I don't begrudge him trying to make a living. Again, this is why I don't necessarily say everybody that works on Wall Street is bad. I worked on Wall Street. I mean, I don't want to be a hypocrite. You're just trying to make a living. And I think, when you incentivize really ugly behavior, though, then you can get a lot of ugly outcomes. Like I think there's a version of the world where you can work at an investment bank, like, in It's a Wonderful Life, and you can be a commercial banker. And like, people are like, hey, this is a really important person in the community that helps us get loans for our small business. Like, bankers don't have to be bad. Silicon Valley guys don't have to be bad, but they've not done themselves any favors.
Mission accomplished, mission impossible. I wouldn't say you look like Tom Cruise, but there are one or two features that might make you look like Tom Cruise. So not everyone involved in this sort of thing is bad. Briefly, Amran, you noted your newsletter. You're obviously skilled at marketing. You're hard-headed financially. What advice would you give other first-time novelists? You successfully convinced the major publisher, Simon & Schuster, to publish your new novel, Leverage. You're obviously very good at marketing. You're on this show. You're on lots of other podcasts. Do aspiring novelists, first-time novelists, do they have to be as skilled in marketing and self-promotion as they are in writing?
Oof, man. I don't know if they have to be as skilled, but they have to have some skills. I don't think the way that the modern digital ecosystem is evolving, that you can just be like, I'm going to sit it out. I'm not going to be on social media. I'm not going to have a newsletter and just be like, I'm just going to write a great book and I'm going to get found. Like, I don't think that's really viable anymore. I think you're going to have to put yourself out there with a newsletter, with social media campaign of some kind, just to show that you're a visible person, because when agents, so first of all, always step one is write a great book. But a lot of people can do that, frankly. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that my book is somehow magically better than everyone else.
Well, you should say that,
Yeah.
Amran.
Well,
you're not going to say it's worse, are you?
No, I think my book is awesome, and I hope everyone reads it. But I think other people have also written awesome books. And what's different is where I have a real advantage is that because I come from the corporate world and I have some experience in marketing, and I'm a loud, obnoxious guy by nature. I knew that I had to kind of get out there in the world and just show off my skills and say, hey, you should pay attention to me because I have something meaningful to say about the world. And I never had 40,000 Twitter followers or anything that got me an agent. But I can tell you that when I was looking for literary agents, they did go to my newsletter. They said, hey, this guy's got talent, because I had a place to showcase my work as well as the novel. I could show that I could do lots of different things, and I could show that I was willing to take risks. And so right now, a little insider scoop for your listeners is I'm actually doing a TikTok campaign in advance of the book's launch. And I'm pretending to be a character like one of the characters in my book, not a character from the book, but in a similar thing. But when I pitched the idea to my publisher, they loved it. They love that I'm willing to take risks, that I'm willing to kind of get out there and put myself out there and try to generate some enthusiasm for the novel, because, publishers only have so many resources, and they are not, and I don't think that they would be offended if I said this, like, most publishing houses are not super skilled marketing organizations. Like, they come from a world where you got,
put it politely.
yeah. I mean, they come from a world where it used to, in the good old days, just in the good old days, even 20 years ago, if you got glowing reviews for your novel or your nonfiction book in the New York Times and a Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, and your author wrote a couple op-eds and got, on a talk show, like, boom, that's all you needed to do. So marketing used to be publicity in publishing, as far as I understand. And marketing is now really marketing. Like, you got to go out there, you got to segment your audience, you got to find out who's interested in your stuff, you got to find out which channels you need to be in. You got to be out
Right.
there pounding the pavement. And those are skills that most people that work in publishing are frankly, I think, are developing, because it wasn't something that they needed. And so if you're an author trying to do something really creative and then also do that, it's a big ask. But I think that you owe it to yourself to develop those skills and try, if you really want to break into the ecosystem that we have right now.
Yeah, and in some ways, social media disintermediated certainly the marketing departments within publishing houses. But the same has happened in terms of technology with AI and writing. You and I think I'm quoting you, said anyone can write a great book. Not anyone, but some people, quite a few people can. These days, all the attention and the obsession, the paranoia is about AI. In fact, when I first saw your book, I thought, oh, this is going to be an AI book, which it isn't. What about the role of AI, Amran? Is it going to make even first-time novelists like yourself redundant? If anyone can indeed write a great book, then anyone can put a narrative into AI, work with Anthropic or OpenAI, and produce a novel in a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, this is not my area of expertise, so no one should.
Do you use AI though in the writing of the book at all?
I do not. I do not. I have only ever used Dolly, the image generator, to make some images for my newsletter. And even as I learned more about the technology, I even kind of felt guilty about that, because I learned about how, like, this is basically just they're pirating images from online and they're feeding it in, and I think that's morally wrong. Now, I'm not averse to technology. I mean, I use Microsoft Word. We're using, digital communication tools right now to talk. And so I think that AI is, if you study the history of economics, and, again, I'm not an economist, but I'm a student of economics. New technologies come about and they eliminate some jobs, and then they create new opportunities and new types of jobs. And I just think that over time, when the hype cycle dies down, AI will be a tool in the toolbox of everybody who's out there doing creative work or doing corporate work. Like, there's going to be an application for the technology. It's probably more in research, probably more in idea generation. I'm not saying I wouldn't use it. I don't use it now because I don't like the way the tech companies have jammed it in my face.
I use it in the sense, this is obviously a real interview. You're a real person, so am I. We're not bots. But I will record this and I'll run it through Anthropic, and they will feed back to me 5 takeaway remarks and help me with some of the writing. So I don't think it's a bad tool. But in terms of writing novels, I'm guessing that many people are using this technology now to write novels, and particularly in business model terms, people throwing them up on Amazon and selling them for 50 cents or 99 cents, and people buying them or even giving them away for free.
Yeah, and I mean, my view, and again, I can't prove this, but my take is that no serious reader wants to read a novel written by a computer. Especially, I think that people read
even
novels,
an intelligent computer, Amran.
I mean, if it was like, if it was Wall-E, if it was HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Okay, if it was a real AGI, I think that's different. What we have now is a linear regression program that you pump information into and it spits out words, and they're calling it life, and that's absurd. It's not alive. It doesn't think. It doesn't have feelings. It just regurgitates, and it regurgitates really well. So I'm not even saying the technology is not effective. I'm saying that it's not a person. It's not a living entity behind the words, no matter how realistic they might seem. And I think that after this hype cycle dies down, the way you're using AI makes a lot of sense. I know other writers and journalists that use AI in a really effective way. I just don't think that when you're looking to connect like a human experience, like what is it that makes us human? Like that people want to read a book written by basically a linear regression machine. It's just, that's my take. I mean, I could be wrong.
How would you? I often ask guests on the show, Amran, how would you prove to me and our audience that you yourself are not a linear progression machine?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you read Leverage, I mean, it's so
Well,
ridiculous that
well, no, but leaving aside leverage, how would you prove it now? What could or should you say to prove you're not a machine?
man, that's the danger, right? I actually wrote about that in a newsletter post of mine in 2023, that the most dangerous part of this is like, how do I prove that I'm really me, right? I mean, we're looking at me. Pretty soon the AI image generation and video generation is going to be so good that you're
It
I'm going to be
already
able to,
is, I think. Well, that's my
right.
question. I mean, who knows whether you're for real or not? I think you probably are. I'm giving
Yeah,
you the
I mean,
benefit of the
I'm for
doubt.
real. I think
Finally, Amran, we don't want you to give away the story of leverage because then people won't buy the book. But let's end with a pitch from you on the book, a minute or two on the story. YP, make it as obviously as attractive as you possibly can. Convince people that they should read this book.
Yeah. So Leverage is the story of Ali Al Jafar. He's an outsider from a humble background, finding his way and fighting his way onto the most prestigious hedge fund on Wall Street. And he is a top performer at his fund, but he's abused by his coworkers, for being different. And he's, they use racism and things as a tool to kind of keep him in his place. And but he excels nonetheless. And one day, this catalyst happens in the markets, and his whole fund crashes, and he loses $300 million in a single day. And so he's sure, he's positive he's going to be fired. And instead, his boss, who is politically connected and just a general sadist, says, "Hey, man, you got 3 months to get this money back, or we actually have a government investigation of insider trading into our fund, and you're going to be our fall guy." And so that's the kind of inciting incident, and the novel takes off from there. And as Al basically tries to fight his way back and recover the money, he starts making increasingly questionable choices and descending deeper and deeper into the financial dark world and getting himself into even more trouble. And then we have, shenanigans ensue.
Well, Amran Gowani, brave man, to come on the show with his new book, Leverage. You put yourself on the line. You've committed many hours to writing this first novel. I want to wish you the best of luck and for being so honest about the commercial, or perhaps the lack of commercial opportunities for full-time novelists. Best of luck, Amran, and we'll have you back on with the second novel. You remember, the second novel is always the hard one. The first ones will be a success, but then you got to keep it up.
Sophomore slump. Hey, thanks.